Hello, welcome back to the On the Line Tennis podcast. It's me, Jack, and again, I'm very, very delighted to welcome Ben Rothenberg back onto the show for some men's predictions of the Australian Open. How you doing, Ben?
Doing well, Jack. It's been a while.
It's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah, good
Yeah.
to see you again. Today we are talking Novak Djokovic and Tommy Paul's semi-final on one side of the draw, and on the top half, Stefanos Tsitsipas and Karen Khachanov. I think we'll start Djokovic Paul and touch on Paul before moving on to a bit of Novak. Tommy Paul, of course, breaking into the top 20 for the first time in his career after defeating Ben Shelton. Caught that from your own Twitter, by the way, Ben. Paul is now only the third active American to reach the semis of a slam after Isner and Tiafoe. Great stuff, obviously, from Paul. Put on a clinic against Shelton, who you did mention in the previous podcast. He's got this game that's just incredibly aggressive, very difficult to play against, given how few people have actually played him on the ATP Tour. But Paul put on a clinic and broke him down. Shelton had held serve 68 times consecutively before Paul broke him again from your Twitter there, Ben. Thank you very much. Told you had stats, and yet. What are your thoughts on Shelton's ceiling first, and any words on the college tennis scene in general with Paul and Shelton making the quarters?
His ceiling is huge. Shelton, I saw for the first time over the summer. Really sort of watched him when he was beating Casper Ruud in Cincinnati, which is a win that kind of almost went under the radar a bit. You know, in tennis circles, even wasn't too much attention on Shelton beating Ruud, and Ruud obviously went on to make the US Open final a couple weeks after that. But Shelton, but has this big game. Kind of, blue. They were playing on a really small court in Cincinnati. The dimensions of it are not huge, so Casper didn't have as much room as he might otherwise to sort of run around and just be a retriever. So Shelton loved it because it's perfect for a big hitter to be on a small court like that. So so Shelton his upside's really big. I mean, he's very physically imposing guy. He's not really built like a traditional tennis player. He almost looks more like a NFL wide receiver kind of person. Just got big, broad shoulders and strong, but at the same time, not like tons of muscle definition just yet. Just sort of very still developing power. And 6'4" and lefty, and those are just it kind of looks like a lab built tennis player in a lot of ways, like what you would make if you were making a dream sort of tennis physical person in some ways. So that was all really quickly noted, and then seeing what he was able to do mentally at the end of last year, reeling off 3 straight challengers in 3 straight weeks. I mean, that's really, really hard to do as a sort of mental and physical stamina feat. To not have any let up there, and got him into top 100, which gets him directly into Australian Open, and so there's a lot to like there. And I picked him, and sort of I did Alex Greskin on the Crack Rackets podcast. I did a predicting the American men's finishers for next season in their ladder, and I had Shelton at number 3 already. And I think I don't know what he was before, but he's probably 15, 16. So I'm making it maybe a little bit higher than that, but making a really big jump up to number 3 and passing people like Tommy Paul, who he won't pass in the short run here. Mm-hmm. But he's been great, and it has to be said he had a very accessible draw in Melbourne. He didn't play anybody in the top 50 before Tommy Paul, but he still took advantage of all those opportunities and some really new experiences, like playing Alex Popyrin in a very partisan atmosphere on John Cain Arena. So he did everything really well. Now comes a tough part where the tour will start to figure him out. There were a couple of stats I don't remember off the top of my head, but a couple of stats of patterns that were very clearly working really well for Tommy Paul in that match. They showed on screen, and I don't want to give examples, so I'll probably screw them up, but it just shows there are going to be holes you can pick in his game, and that the tour will find those and exploit those maximally, and it'll be up to Shelton to then patch those holes. So that's a bit of the chase that happens once you get on tour. But for right now, it's going to be a bit of a honeymoon period. Certainly once for this tournament, and maybe for a couple more months if he's lucky. People still don't have a full book on him.
With Indian Wells and Miami coming up as well, of course, why not? I wonder, Ben, so with Paul now making the semi-finals, I'm just interested to hear what the general perception is from fans in the US. And Shelton is now one of 10 Americans in the top 50, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if that is enough for American fans, given the history of the US tennis, right? And they've been waiting a long time for a slam champ, so to say. Is it guts or glory in a way? Is a US Open semi-finalist in Paul enough, or do the country expect more in general, do you think?
I think both. I think that the calibration, obviously there's been no American man in a slam finals since 2009 when Andy Roddick made it most recently at Wimbledon. Then no champion since Roddick in 2003 U.S. Open, which came at the heels of a bunch of other winners because like Agassi also won a Slam in 2003. He won Australia that year, and Sampras had won the U.S. Open the year before that. So it was really a lot, and then pretty swift curtain falling to nothing. So, I think for a lot of American tennis fans, they were calibrated. It depends on your age in some way. Like if you're calibrated to where you were around for the Sampras Agassi and early Roddick days, because Roddick also was a top 5 player for a long time and felt very much in the mix. And U.S. has not had anyone like that since Andy Roddick. If you feel like that everything short of that is disappointing, and a lot of people do, and U.S. is a country of 310 million people, and we're getting outpassed by these much smaller countries, and I do think that this has been seen as meaningful progress the last year. With Frances Tiafoe making that semifinal of the U.S. Open, that was that was the most sort of high-profile U.S. men's tennis result in a long time in terms of doing it at home, and obviously Tiafoe has this massive personality and stage presence and charisma that did draw people in from outside the main fans of the sport, more so than like a Taylor Fritz winning in New Orleans, which is also a good result for sure. Beating Rafa in the final, even if Rafa was hurt, that still will make headlines to do that at Netflix episodes. So
of course.
So it depends on your sort of standards. Like there's still no one in the top part yet convincingly as a fixture there, but this was a tournament where it really did feel like the depth that we've been seeing bubble really did pay dividends, because a lot of the sort of B team, for lack of a better word, was the ones who were making the deeper push. People like JJ Wolf, who's just been very much like in the cavalry, making it all the way to the 4th round. Who's not a name who would be familiar to even a lot of casual tennis fans that much. Brooksby, Tommy Paul, Shelton, Michael Moe was a huge surprise that he made it to the 3rd round of this tournament. Korda obviously made it to the quarterfinals. Mackie McDonald beats Rafa. Tiafoe. It was definitely a very positive steps for American tennis. Where does the Tommy Paul run sort of score on the Richter scale for American sports? Not very high. I mean, you can say that he has there's stats like he's the first American man in the semifinals of Australian Open since 2009, but obviously Australia is just different time zones he's doing it and stuff. It's not going to have same resonance, and he hasn't had so much about what you do. Is also about the wins you get. Like one of the big deals with Tiafoe is he beat Nadal at the U.S. Open, and that was really his story. The same way that like you could say actually like to use another American example, like Sloane Stephens became a bigger star for beating Serena and making the semifinals of the 2013 Australian Open than Sofia Kenin became for winning the 2020 Australian Open. Because the beating Serena is the narrative and the hook for people.
That makes sense.
And so that's what people in mainstream culture can understand, beating Serena more than they can even sort of quantify winning a major. But Tommy has this chance if in the next round, if he takes it, of playing Djokovic. And if he beats Djokovic in Australia, people I think will understand the resonance of that pretty well. And then he'll be in a final, which is also a new hurdle to clear. So but Tommy's got to be very happy. Obviously, it's a big result for him, and he's been very steady and impressive in his own ways for sure. It's the first time I think a lot of people are watching him close up with any attention, especially even in that match against Shelton. You could tell the commentators hadn't seen tons of Tommy Paul, even if he is a top 50 player. But he's been very steady, and it's great to see him taking advantage of sort of early career swoon he had, when he came on tour and was, I think, fair to say, known for being sort of just a pejorative like party boy kind of character, not really super dedicated and professional. But he has changed that for sure. Relatively early in his career still, which is great. And so he's had a nice little run here and been very professional and steady, and looked very, very smart and savvy and ready to beat someone like Shelton, who perplexed everyone else so far.
Really interesting there, Ben. Obviously touched on the task he would have in the next round and how big it would be if he did make it, but he is up against the 9-time champion, unbeaten in semi-finals and finals on a 39 match win streak in Australia, Novak Djokovic. He is looking absolutely imperious. Firstly, Ben, if you don't mind, I know you and Novak's fan base at least have had a bit of a checkered history. Sure. Is there anything you could touch on that at all? You might be repeating yourselves.
I mean, I just think, and it's a thing also I've learned relatively late in this phenomenon to become sort of like, I've become a character in like Serbian tabloid coverage of Djokovic. And like the antagonist who's always out to get him, and it's American, and it's just so evil, and I just don't think I'm remotely that important to anyone's life, especially Novak Djokovic. Like I just don't. I think people really overestimate my powers and my relevance in those
Fair.
contexts for sure. So that's all exhausting, and the response from his fans are incredibly defensive and protective about him, and can go on. Anyone who's been on Twitter and tennis Twitter knows that. So that's disappointing and frustrating that it's how it is. And Novak and I in person pretty much have always gotten along, and yeah, it's been pretty easy and great to cover on the one-on-one sort of level with him. During my whole career, and my career, he's been the dominant player of certainly men's player of my time on tour. So it's been no problem there. If I was this anguished by him winning, as people claim that I am, then I would have quit tennis long ago. But it's fine. So it's the Djokovic thing always just feels sort of, or at least recently, especially Australia, just kind of feels fraught in that certain way. Like it just doesn't, even for him, like he doesn't seem like he's having a ton of fun at this tournament. Like he's been sort of responding to a lot more sort of criticisms, real and perceived, and just sort of engaging with them and being kind of negative, and just hasn't seemed like the fun of Djokovic of old. And this really does seem like his kind of revenge tour. But he's almost like not even letting himself enjoy it per se that we've seen. And obviously the task is not done for him. He's in the semifinals. So maybe once he wins the tournament, he can exhale. But it hasn't been a fun ride, I got to say, for him at this tournament. It's felt very serious, and it's been sad. The whole thing is just unnecessary and frustrating. And hopefully, at least this tournament, win or lose, brings some closure to that arc of Djokovic in Australia.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It feels like any questions, and probably you might feel that yourself, about Djokovic and directed to Djokovic are always going to be about the same thing. It's kind of a shame because at the moment he's playing insanely well. The way he dispatched de Minaur, again, just talking about the tennis, which is all I want to do. Like the way he dispatched de Minaur and Rublev was insane in straight sets. I mean, the guy was in a rush to get off court. Maybe because of the worries of the hamstring. He did mention that the longer the match goes on, the worse it gets. So he just sort of turned it up a level in aggression, and it worked out really, really well. It's been terrifying, and frankly, Tommy Paul's a great player. The only thing I could see him having on Djokovic is that he comes forward a bit more than other players. He will be a little less vulnerable at the baseline compared to other players, but I think that wins him a set, maybe, and that's it, to be honest. Ben, does he have a chance against Djokovic?
A set would be a big accomplishment against Djokovic in this mode. Just the scorelines he's put up against de Minaur, especially, where he really seemed to come out ready to destroy 2-1 and 2. And then that was one of, I used this phrase before this week, but it really felt like the main stop on his like revenge tour of Australia was the de Minaur match. And then Rublev, similar scoreline, 1-2 and 4, like just in Rublev's a top 5 seed here. Like he's that good. And Tommy, is playing the best tennis of his life, arguably. It's looked really, really fluid, and will have nothing to lose in this match. Obviously, was not really expected to make the semifinal, whereas Rublev has made a lot of quarterfinals and could feel some more cumulative weight of that for sure. But yeah, it's tough to pick anybody against Djokovic now. And I think for Tommy or for Khachanov or Tsitsipas in the final, they're going to need a meaningful drop in Djokovic's level to have a chance, whether that's mental or emotional or tennis or physical with the hamstring especially. They're going to need something to go off the rails because it's currently on track to steamroll everybody.
Yeah, quite right. And I would like to touch on those semi-finals a little bit. Stefanos Tsitsipas, of course, against Karen Khachanov. Tsitsipas was always on the list for me at the start of the tournament to get to the final. Honestly, I thought he was the favourite in that half. I've had a lot of bad predictions this tournament, Ben, but that was one at least I could stand by. The slower conditions really suiting him. His serve good enough to hit through, and his forehand just benefiting from that extra time to set up. I believe his return as well, historically been a little worse in this tournament, but he's been so confident with a little extra time on it. It's not really much of a weakness. And of course, he's got the Greek contingent here. He feels like he's at home here. There's loads of factors falling into his camp. But the one thing I wanted to mention is the fact that he is such a good mental player. He's saving break points, here, there, and everywhere. 43 of 49 faced, winning 13 of the 19 games where he's faced a break point. The Sinner match was amazing. He gets flack for being sort of mentally maybe weak, but really, when he's got his bread and butter, serving forehand, he is playing insanely well under pressure. Do you feel like he doesn't get enough credit for that, Ben?
Yeah, I don't think he's sort of a mentally weak player per se. I wouldn't say that. Like, I just think that he's he's sort of had a lot of experience being a star attraction at this point, and most of it, I mean, he's played all but one of his matches in a night session in Rod Laver Arena, all of them in Rod Laver Arena. And Djokovic, I think, has played all of his matches night session, and so they really have been kind of the twin tempos. And I think part of that probably is obviously Rafa going out early, and maybe Rafa saying he didn't want to play night sessions, very potentially, because Rafa, only played 2 matches. They're in the same half the draw. But Tsitsipas has been the guy kind of carrying the torch, and that match against Sinner was the best, I think most critical match of the tournament for how the draw is shaken out. And his Sinner, who knows if he could take it all the way and run to the semifinals or final with it, but he's been knocking for sure. It just hasn't quite broken through. Yeah, but Tsitsipas only made one final of a slam, which is surprising given everything. And just the thing with Tsitsipas is his 2022, it didn't seem like he was anywhere near his best on some level on a lot of times, but he could have finished here number 1 if he'd won Turin at the same time. His floor, I think I used that phrase in the last episode too, but his floor is very high now.
Yeah.
And he's, the dips in Tsitsipas are still, he's winning a lot of matches with his less than best tennis. And so Australia's been a happy hunting ground for him. This is his 4th semifinal there already.
Yeah.
He's definitely due a final. And he, Khachanov is not a bad matchup for him. Khachanov's a bit more on the counterpunching sort of scale in a lot of ways, and for a big guy. And I think Tsitsipas can match up nicely against that. I think that's a very winnable match for him. And then he's absolutely a competent player mentally and game-wise to be against Djokovic in a final. He's as worthy as a challenger as there was in this field for that moment, even if he still is going to be considered a huge underdog.
It's it's interesting because I agree. Certainly in a final, you touched on that. I still think he has a chance against Novak, given his head-to-head. If Novak gets through, if he gets through, I think the way he's playing, he can hold serve well enough, even against Djokovic, playing average tennis. Obviously, you're right. There would maybe have to be a dip for the win to actually happen, but he's got a chance. I'm more interested just where you think Tsitsipas kind of ranks among that gen. It's quite an interesting question. Against Medvedev, against Zverev. He's made 6 slam semi-finals now. There's very few players that have done that, including Medvedev and Zverev, who've only made 5. I guess it's only 1 less. But anyway, where does he rank for you among those 3?
Yeah, it's tough. I think they're very different in their own ways, actually, the 3 of them as players. Medvedev, I think, has a reputation for stepping up and really kind of playing his best on the big stages, or certainly we've seen that from him repeatedly. I think Zverev has the opposite reputation, where he's had some real disappointing losses, and he obviously broke out as the star first among them and won that Masters early and was a number 1 junior and was the highest touted and first arriving, and then he got there quickly and then had this horrible record against top 10 players at Grand Slams, and took a long time to make even his first Slam quarterfinal after he'd won Masters events already and stuff like that. So the progress was less linear for Zverev on that level. Tsitsipas is somewhat in between the two. He hasn't had the sort of great bringing his best consistently to the biggest matches with Medvedev, I think, did early in his career, which was when Medvedev stand out. And Medvedev obviously has the slam, which is the meaningful mark that people care about in this era. And also Medvedev hit number 1, even if he didn't do much once he got to number 1. So Medvedev, I think, has had the best career pretty easily of the 3 of them. Yeah. But Tsitsipas, I think it's probably number 2 there. He's well, I don't know if he's had a Zverev or not. I have to sort of look at the numbers for that. But he's doing well, and he's got time. And that's the thing too. You just sort of fear with these guys, feeling so much pressure and money and attention, and you're the next this, and then when you're not, if you're hitting a ceiling of some kind, even if it is a quarterfinal or semifinal ceiling, that can be really painful to feel like you're falling short and disappointing and a failure on some level if you're not doing what you've been told you're going to do. So Tsitsipas, the longer he sort of hits this plateau, if you want to say, of just the semifinals or occasional final, if it's really been a semifinal plateau largely, that's going to be tough for him for sure. But I think I have to go through and double check, but almost all of his losses have been to big 3 guys, right, in these matches. So the final. I think pretty much that. So he's stepped up well, and he's still really pretty young by tennis standards. He's not super young. He's 24.
Yeah,
he's he's got time, and but it's just the tour has not been primed until Alcaraz for meaningfully young champions breaking through, and certainly I'm sure the whole time your podcast has existed, like it just hasn't happened. So like even when Team won the US Open, they're like, a young guy breaks through. It's like Team was like 26 or 27. Like he wasn't young by any normal tennis standard when he won his US Open title. So anyway, so that's I don't know if I gave a good answer there, but I think Tsitsipas, is somewhere in between, a medium sort of performer. Hasn't had the Medvedev, like, wow, look at this guy own the big stage, and nor has he had the Zverev, wow, look at this guy, not doing what he's excited to late in tournaments. It's been in between.
Yeah. Well, you've touched on it, of course. I hope that he does sort of live up. He would live up to his potential here, obviously, if he were to win the tournament. Ben, I think we'll close up shop there. I think you've probably got Djokovic to win the tournament, so the prediction's a little bit...
Yeah, pretty clean, pretty easy. Djokovic over Tsitsipas in the final. Would be thrilled to be surprised on some way. Not how much Djokovic should lose. I think Djokovic, deserves the records of all time things. So him racking up more stuff is fine by me. It's just a sort of pure. It's not Djokovic in Australia. It's not unlike Nadal in Paris. It takes out when you feel like you go there and you know what you're going to get. It's meaningfully less exciting. Would like for it to not feel that way. Djokovic would love to see him get tested. But he is the favorite for sure. And I hope whatever happens for him here, there's some sort of catharsis that he and everyone, but I think it's really him at this point, can kind of let it go, because the crowd's been fine with him. There's a couple hecklers here and there, but it's been relatively normal, tournament from on that level. But just, the tension in him feels so much. I'm sure it's not helping the hamstring. I'm sure that sort of tension he feels. Yeah, looking forward to this all being behind us.
Yeah, likewise, Ben. Thank you very much for coming on. Very, very honoured to have you on. As I'll just say again, thank you for coming on. Didn't have to, of course. Ben Rothenberg, at Ben Rothenberg on Twitter, guys. Please go follow him. I'm at @ontheline_Jack on Twitter. Like and subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you very much for coming on, Ben.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, Jack.
And see everybody next time on the Online Tennis Podcast. Cheers.